officers' personnel records permanently. She didn't like that. The PAB is asked the commissioners to please consider legislation amending the Accountability Act to provide for some type of expungement process when the officers are not charged. So she'd like to maybe fix that issue of it having been on their record. It's just not fair. And then the last thing she does is she mentions that the citizens of Carroll County are fortunate to have law enforcement agencies who are strongly invested in the community, are striving to a high level of professional excellence, and are very cooperative in this new process. And I think this board agrees 100% with those statements. We think you guys are doing a great job keeping us safe. Please keep it up. Okay. Any questions, concerns, comments? All right. So at this point in the agenda, I'd like to turn it over to Tom. We've got it for an update from the ACC. Tom?
All right, so Bill asked me to come to the meeting and future meetings to kind of give an update on cases. And what I'm going to do is talk about the cases from the previous 3 months. So I'll hit December, January, and February, and then the next meeting I'll do the next quarter. So in the last 3 months, we had 15 cases. 2 of those situations involved the same situation with 2 officers. So it actually is 13 different events. And out of that, 13 were not charged, 2 were charged for violations. I'll just hit the highlights are in December, we had 3 cases. One was civility, discourteous behavior, and oftentimes those are very simple to see. You look at the video, and it's so what a member of the public might seem as discourteous might be direct communication about something that happened that they may not want to hear, but it's very clear when you look at the video. The video is like is the story. So we had one of those. We had a situation where one officer failed to notify the complainant that they were being recorded and failed to properly identify himself, which was a charge. And then the other one was an alleged violation of property rights, privacy rights. That was exoneration. Then in January, we had 4 cases. One was alleged rude and unprofessional behavior, violation of privacy rights. There was no charge. One was an alleged Fourth Amendment violation regarding a traffic stop and a canine search. And we had one situation where there was a civility, it was a civil matter involving custody rights. We see a lot of these complaints evolve from not police matters per se as far as a violation of the law, but almost like the officer comes on the scene, they're trying to de-escalate the situation, and one person assumes because the officer makes a decision that he's taking sides or she's taking sides. We get a lot of those kind of cases. And those 2 cases, we found no violation, unfounded. And again, in February, we had, let's see here, we had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we had 8 cases. Alleged 4th violation, unfounded. Use of unnecessary force was unfounded, no charge. One was a rudeness to a citizen in a civil matter, was no charge. We had a case involving lack of civility, failure to file reports, involving 2 different officers. There was no charge. We had a case with an alleged racial bias. This was a case when you first hear racial bias, it kind of draws your attention. But in this case, it was an automatic plate reader that identified this vehicle was having a driver without a proper license. So when they pulled the driver over, it ended up being that this was happening constantly, that this driver for a long period of time had been driving without a license. And instead of, getting their license updated, they just continued to drive, and then got upset when the officers pulled them over and took action. So it was sometimes the words, you have to be careful. When you hear that, you say, oh, wow, that's really bad, but then you have to understand the facts. Then we had an unfair treatment during a car stop in a town. This was a situation where there was a car stop and a canine search. The officer, as normal policy, asked the occupants to leave the vehicle while they did the search. And I believe it was a cold day. They were upset because they had to get out of the car, but there was no charges. So, and then there was one involving a vehicle pursuit. And in that case, there were charges made for lack of having the siren on during a chase. So out of the 15 cases, there were 2 charged, so that's about the 10% rule, which is not bad. Of the 15, say 5 county and 10 municipal cases. That's kind of how they break down. So that's kind of the down and dirty update.
Any questions for Tom? All right, thank you. Hearing none. Tom, you also have an update for the ACC membership and training?
Yeah, so like the PAB, the ACC's gone through a complete change of members. So I'm the only carryover member from the almost now 2.5 years ago. So I serve as the chairman, and Stacy Schaefer was replaced by Bill, because he serves in that dual role. Judd Larimore has one more meeting. He's being replaced by a lady named Michelle Denton from the Sykesville area. Dean Horvath is being replaced by a gentleman named Doug Smith, who's from Mount Airy. And Tambra Powell's being replaced by a gentleman named Lee Esworthy. Now, 2 of these members require training, because while they can come to a meeting, they can't vote until they complete this training, which is now scheduled for the 24th to the 28th of March. So, as good Lord willing, in April we'll have a full complement of 5 members again. We operated at the last meeting with 3. It's not the best, but we're almost to the point where we're going to have everybody there. So I think also Beth is going to attend the training. Beth from the county attorney's office acts as our kind of liaison. They've been telling her that she couldn't come, but now they said as long as it doesn't take a seat away from somebody that needs it, they'll allow her to attend. And I think that'd be very helpful for her. So that's kind of the update.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Tom, you also have the checklist that we've been working on.
This was kind of a carryover from the last board, and if you look at this, you probably first say, it looks familiar, because what we tried to do is take the best practices of what we saw and how the various departments submit their cases, and kind of created a checklist template for those cases. The one for adjudicated cases was really developed almost entirely by the Sheriff's Department. We had really good collaboration at the end of the year to come up with a case where the evidence clearly showed, without a doubt, that there was no violation. We put into our rules a way that we could deal with those cases quickly without having to put a lot of time and effort into it, and it's worked very well. We've had probably, I think, 5 or so of those cases so far, and we've been able to dispose of them pretty quickly. So that checklist template is there, and that's what we really suggest for the departments to utilize. Some of them, like I said, are already doing it. And then the other one was for a typical internal investigation where it may not be clear and you're doing a full investigation. It kind of lays out in almost a summary that when the ACC members can kind of follow this, and then they can go look at the evidence, whether it's the body camera, whether it's the in-car camera, and any kind of, sometimes we get CAD reports, sometimes we get recorded interviews, both verbal and video. So it kind of lays out the format. We kind of here worked off of Westminster's, how Westminster submits their cases, which we thought was really good. We did make some changes to it. In most cases, as you saw, we're not getting, we haven't had a lot of findings against officers, which is a good thing. So when the cases are submitted and there's been no recommendation for discipline, it really isn't so important then that the head of the law enforcement agency provide a recommendation. However, if there's some action where the department from its investigation determines that some discipline should be done, then of course it's very important to have the recommendation from the head of the law enforcement agency. And you know, that's pretty much what we're getting. So that's kind of that. Be happy to answer any questions. But as I said, a lot of you guys are already using the templates in some way, shape, or form, and it's very much appreciated. And that's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Tom. Any,
So, I do have one question. So are they providing these to you as they, like, is this part of the package, kind of like the checklist? So-
Well, because it's relatively new,
Okay.
I know probably 4 or 5 of the departments are already using the template in some way, shape, or form. Like I said, I know the county sheriffs are. And the other departments from our last meeting, we're starting to utilize it. So I think it's something that will come along, but I can't say so far. We just don't have a lot of experience yet.
I mean, I would recommend it just so that they get into a pattern of looking at the same thing for each law enforcement agency for each case. I think that's gonna make it easier for, so you're always seeing the same,
Well, the important thing is.
so I appreciate this.
We
This, I
don't
think will
want to
help.
tell, it's not up, we don't want to tell the department how to do their investigation.
Right.
If they think an abbreviated investigation is in order, so be it. If not, so be it. And they have to do the investigation the way they see fit. This is just a way to organize the information.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're not telling anybody how to do the investigation, but I think at least it's a checklist. Plus, you can look at it and say, oh, yeah, I might want to
Yeah.
include that. We don't have that, whatever's.
You know.
I think it
mean,
just
so
helps
far-
for the ACC to have consistency of a checklist, because that's what they're gonna be looking for, okay, or the report, I mean, at least, this is all
I
new.
don't
so-
want you to think that we're not getting the information we need. We
Oh,
are.
no, I know you are, I'm just saying this, hey, checklist, man, it's like, you try to make it so that it's the same all the time, and I think, so I appreciate that, I think this is gonna be super helpful, because as you know, we've all been starting this and learning, this is all a new process, so I think these checklists will help for consistency, so thank you for that, and I would suggest you guys at least take a look at it, so everybody's doing sort of the same thing, because you guys are gonna, and the ACC is gonna look at, patterns and just, it's easy.
Well, any feedback you all have, would be great. It still, as you say, it says draft.
Right.
Because we wanted to have this meeting. I sent it out a couple of months ago for people to look at, but this is the first time we've had a chance.
So all you guys got these, right? Perfect, okay. What are your thoughts? Any thoughts on these for you guys?
Hey, we appreciate the abbreviated investigation. It is a good way to go, especially when you have a case where you're looking at the body worn camera and it's clearly not there to meet the allegation. I do have one question, though. When we say BWC available, if it's yes, do you still want us to submit it on the abbreviated, or do you want to review it and then we have it if you need it?
Yeah, I think it's good to submit it. It may be relevant, it may not be, but,
Okay. So no matter what, submit the body worn camera footage.
I mean, usually at least from my experience, in these cases of they did or didn't, the body worn camera and sometimes the in-car camera tell the whole story.
Exactly.
So it's good to have, yeah.
Okay.
And I think that these forms are very valuable in the terms of, if we get the information to the ACC that they need the first time, we don't have to send back and bother you guys about more information. We don't need you to, maybe have to come in and testify as to what happened. If we get the information that we need, it saves time on our part, and it saves time on your part. Any other comments?
If you got rid of the window tint, the historic tags, and the civil matters, there probably wouldn't be a lot of cases coming before us if you want the truth. But that's a whole nother story.
And the dog sniffs.
Yeah, well, that's a, no.
Okay. All right. Well, if there are no other comments, we'll just move on to the next agenda item, which is the PAB ACC complaint tracker. This is probably the healthiest handout that we provided to you. The complaint tracker sort of fell in a bit of a disarray as the transfer of me and Stacy took over, and it really wasn't being updated the last 3-4 months of the year as it should have been. And so we went back and we assembled all the files and data that we had, and we did our best to bring this tracker up to date, up as far as last February's meeting, the ACC, as to what happened. There are a few, one or two spots where we just didn't have the data. The date of the complaint we didn't know in some of the cases, and the investigating agency complaint number. But generally, this tracker is fairly accurate, and what we're going to do in the future is try to keep it updated on a monthly basis based on the ACC's decisions, and then provide it to you every 3 months when the accountability board meets. There's another issue with the tracker where, in the interest of clarity and openness, we want to try to get it onto the county website. And this is something that the PAB is going to talk about because we're having technical difficulties getting it on the website. Chris, the IT public relations guy, is giving us a lot of reasons why it can't go on the website in its current form. There's been some suggestions to PDF it, but there's an issue where it has to be able to be read from your phone, and also the phone has to be able to read it to you with the Siri. Chris, I saw you come in.
Yes.
Could you come up and give us a review of the other reasons that it can't go on the website in its current form?
Well, I didn't quite hear what you already discussed, but I was on the stairwell. But one of the biggest reasons is ADA compliance and mobile responsive. ADA is Disability Act. The Department of Justice last year put out a whole 75-page document for all government websites to be more accessible to people with disabilities. That, as you know, anything that's table, spreadsheet, anything like that, websites do not like. And this does not fit on a cell phone. If you open this up on a cell phone, I just published it just now, it doesn't work. It's not what we like to put out there. And especially we have to be very sensitive to our disability population. So I guess I did make it public real quick before I came down, but even when we turn it into a PDF, because there is so much data included in that, it's hard to read. And I think your key thing is that it needs to be legible. I know when we first got it, it was missing a lot of information, and we didn't want to put that out either. So the other thing that came up was that, is this redundant? Is this already included in your annual report? Is it the same information? I don't judge contents. That's for you to decide. I'm just here to make sure that it's legible and able to be accessed by our population.
Okay.
I just checked some other counties real quick before I came down. But Baltimore County just has their annual reports, duties and a review of what the Police Accountability Board, same as Frederick County, and they have their annual reports. There is no large-scale document like that on either of their websites. I didn't get to any other counties yet, but I think that's important to do also, is to look what other counties are doing.
Okay, Chris, thank you. Is it your belief that it basically has to be in a narrative format in order to go onto the website properly? Is that
Yeah, the key thing is that it can embed in our content management system, which is what we use to build our website. And that is already ADA responsive. We throw in a table, which is basically a spreadsheet, and it just doesn't like that. It just spits out all over the place. You know, tables are great for, spreadsheets are great for sharing that information internally with other people, but when it comes to web, we avoid them like the plague. So it's just that easy to say it that way.
Okay. Any comments or questions for Chris from anyone?
My question is it necessary that this is on there? I mean, is the annual report not enough?
That's something that the PAB is going to discuss, maybe incorporating it into the annual report and just putting it out there once a year. But that's something we'll talk about internally as to how we want to do it the best way. Every 3 months, maybe a little bit too much to narrate it and get it on there, but that's something that, we need to discuss.
Well, thanks for that. That's an important update. I think maybe we'll have to talk about it and see if there's some way to come to a line-by-line item of this summary to make it work for the ADA.
Yeah, one of the things that, when you put this on the website, is the newspapers see it. And when the newspapers got, Stacy incorporated this into the end-of-the-year report. And when the newspapers, and it was on the website, and when the newspapers got the end-of-the-year report, they went right to the ACC cases and reported on that, rather than some of the other positive aspects of what she mentioned in her report. And so, you want to give the newspapers I'm not saying we shouldn't be open, but I don't know if we want to give the newspapers the chance every 3 months to criticize us. Whereas, at the end of the year, you wrap everything up. That's certainly something we can talk about.
Well, and I think we were looking at transparency of how the public can see it, and I think that's something, we'll talk about a little bit further down, but I think as far as getting community outreach and education, and that can be part of it too, because I think you need to counter the narrative from the negative press, right? The press are just going to focus in on the negative cases because that's where people read newspapers. But at the same time, if we're educating the community and having some outreach, and I think that's one of the things we talked about getting, that's something we certainly can ask the county directly for funding for. That's, if they want direct items that we need funding for, it's something like that. Because I think that's going to be a huge component about this, is to get them educated to know what is a legitimate complaint, what is the process, and then to hopefully cut off some of these complaints from even starting, so they're not wasting the law enforcement's time for complaints that really don't warrant this process. But at the same time, that would be followed with the information about the tracker too, and somehow to maybe summarize it, I think. But I think the whole idea of this whole thing is to be community open to the public, sort of.
Good point.
Any
Any,
thoughts on that? Or-
Well, just the same thing. I mean, I don't know that the community, how often do the community going in and looking at a year-end report that is written in pretty legal jargon as well, and there's a lot of information. So, I think that my recommendation is we have some kind of administrative session to talk about the community outreach portion, what should be visible, make sure we're being transparent, and as Ian said, make sure that we're balancing all of the good news with, the work that we have to do.
okay, we'll do that. Any other comments from the board or from the community out there? Or Chris, anything else you got?
I've got nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
And thank you for everything you do with regard to the IT and all that jazz.
So in relation to the tracker, do you want to wait to talk about some of the stuff on here now, or do you want to move on to other stuff? I don't know how you, as far as the agenda. I mean, I've just got, like, if we're trying to identify some trends on the tracker, That's what I was asking about. Is this a good time for that?
Well, I'm pretty much finished with talking about the tracker, but
Oh.
if you have some things you want.
Okay, well, I guess one of the purviews of the board, right, and again, I appreciate all your guys' stuff. We didn't have data to track before, because when you first start, they're like, identify trends. Well, there weren't any trends to identify because we hadn't been doing this. But now that we've been doing this for 2 years, some of the trends are starting to show up on this tracker at least. And I think, like, the majority of them, so if you're looking at a trend, right, it seems to me that it's rudeness, discretion, and civility, right? That we're getting these complaints on, you know? So what my thought was is just to bring that to your attention, right? Because that's what it says, is to work with law enforcement to identify trends and then how we can correct them, you know? And I was thinking about that on the drive over here. I was thinking, like, how do you become more discretionary, more civility, eliminate rudeness while you're all stressed out, right? Because an officer, obviously, on any sort of, I'm stressed out, right? I'm stressed. I'm pulling somebody over or whatever. I'm under pressure. I'm stressed. My adrenaline's rushing. And then at the same time, I got to be like, you know, good morning, ma'am. How are you? You know, this is why I pulled you over. Please be advised you're being recorded. You know, all the steps that the officer needs to take at the same time while my adrenaline's rushing. So I'm thinking maybe some training in that area where stress the officer all out and then get them to be discretionary, not rude, right? Because these are the things, but a lot of times, like, I know when I get in conflict situations in anything in life, right? Like at a store or anything, when I start to look at, like, my role in that, right? When you're like, oh my God, maybe I'm being a jerk, right? So I think when people realize it, or if you're coming at them the other way, I think it'll eliminate a lot of these complaints, because they're like, yeah, I was kind of a jerk too. And the officer was nothing but kind and discretionary, right? So there's no need for a complaint, is my point, right? Versus it starts off with this combative thing, and now they're like, well, I'm gonna complain, and now I'm gonna follow this process, which is probably doesn't justify or warrant. So you guys are spending a lot of time on these after the fact, just to find out that they're not warranted for this board or for the whole process. What a waste of time, of your valuable time. So that's what I was just throwing it out there. So to identify the trends and then put it on your radar is how do you, and I'll leave it up to you guys to figure out how to, right? That's your thing. But I was just thinking, like, yeah, I can understand. I'm thinking from the officer's perspective too, at least if it's me, all my adrenaline's rushing. I'm under high stress. And how do I become civil and use really good discretion and avoid being rude, even when people are being nasty to you, because usually that's what happens. They're going to be not in a great place. And I can't imagine what you encounter a lot of the times. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
If I may, I would say respectfully that the findings prove that those officers in most cases are in fact very courteous, and just exactly as you said, they are saying, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, may I help you? And it often is a complaint that is just, I didn't like the stop. I didn't want it, but it's, I guess, out of not understanding what else to say, they say I was treated rude. I'm not saying that that doesn't happen, but the majority of those cases prove that that was not accurate.
Absolutely.
And we had a case that involved it was a civil matter with domestic dispute. Obviously, there was huge issues between the parents and the kids. And the officers involved deserved a medal for the way they handled it, because I don't think they could have done any better. And it was all recorded on film. But if you read the complaint, you would have thought that these were the 2 worst officers in the world. But, you know, our job is to judge from the evidence. And somebody that's, I think, you know, what we've seen is people stressed out in a situation where it's, I own the horse, you don't own it, and the officer has to sort through this. Mostly it's almost like their real focus is de-escalate the situation, because they're not a criminal violation. It's just trying to get these 2 folks separated, bring peace, and allow everybody to move on. And with civil matters, sometimes there's already a lot of built-up angst among these people anyhow. The officer comes on the scene and they have to kind of like deal with this. And it does generate complaints. I'm not sure how you can avoid that, but what I've seen is the officers do a remarkable job in dealing with it, from what we've seen in our cases. But, I don't know what else to say.
Bill, can I ask the question? I mean, when I look at this, and I see what the Tony Chief is saying, to me, the community education, the community outreach ought to be trying to discourage people from launching frivolous complaints that's going to be immediately found by the cameras to discredit themselves and their complaint. And my question is there any pushback on those people? Is there anything that happens to those people who are bringing the frivolous ones that appear to be most of the ones that's on this list?
No, the answer,
They not only,
They just get arrested.
Yeah, that'll never happen.
not only is there nothing that comes against them, but for the officer, at least under current state law,
Right,
that
and
complaint stays on their record forever.
So then let me ask a different question. Is there the ability to take some of this video that's completely frivolous and put that out there for the public to see?
I think there's a
I don't know the answer to that.
question for the county attorney.
Yeah.
It's a privacy issue with
Right,
that.
right.
and it's very difficult just because we don't want to discourage legitimate complaints and embarrass people at the same time. But as we can see, if we could just find a way to exonerate completely and handle it, which is what we're trying to do, handle them quickly and get them off the books. Unfortunately, though, out of spite, these officers have records for a long time with this on there, which is insane that we don't have. So the strong pushback to the legislator is,
Well, it's like I think it was a lawyer explained to me that, for a person that was convicted of a crime, they can actually, depending on the circumstances, can have their record expunged. But a police officer that has an allegation against them can't. To me, it's just out of whack, but that's just my humble opinion.
I'm with you. I mean, I think, so this brings up a lot of the back to us, right? What can we do from your perspective to better eliminate
the
some of these
community as well.
complaints?
So my opinion is that there's no amount of outreach that's going to stop a complaint that we might consider frivolous, because typically what we find is that people are upset when they make the complaint. And for whatever reason, they perceived a slight. What I think is key here is what the board has done in providing the alternative to do the abbreviated form. Because where I think the big problem exists, we don't have a problem processing complaints and following the law and handling the process and working with you guys. What bothers me most as the chief is putting the officer under the stress of being under investigation constantly for what we would consider to be a complaint that doesn't hold merit. We have the ability now, especially with body-worn camera footage, which in a couple of months becomes mandatory for everybody, that we can all look at what actually happened on film. If we don't have to put the officer through the interview process and the stress of an internal investigation, and we can handle it in the way that the board is headed towards allowing us to handle it, then I think that solves the issue. I don't think it's perfect. I agree with you that I think that it's wrong that you can't remove an unsubstantiated complaint from your record, but I think the state legislature has made it clear. My feeling is that they want to show that even though there's these non-sustained complaints, if Officer Ledwell has 5 of them, there's a problem there, even though they're all haven't reached the level of being sustained. So we don't want that to be hidden. We want that to be there so that down the road you could see that there was a problem with Officer Ledwell. I don't think there's a will to change that law right now. I think we have what we have, and we're going to have to work with it. I think that the board has been gracious to allow us to do an abbreviated for when we all can look at the body-worn camera footage and say, okay, we consider this frivolous or unsubstantiated or not sustained. We don't have to put the officer through the stress, because that's where the problem lies, is if I'm under investigation for 4 months, wondering whether I'm going to get charged for something for just doing my job, that's a lot of stress. And when you do that over and over again, and you're adding that to the normal stresses of being a police officer, it's very difficult. We now have the ability to all look at the footage, to follow the process, follow the law, be transparent, provide everything to you guys, and not put the officer under that repeated stress. I think that's the answer. I think it's the best answer we have available under the current set of rules and laws.
So just let me interject. So are you saying that these charges, this complaint being on the officer's record, you know, forever, is not an issue for you?
Oh, it's absolutely an issue. I think it should be expunged like any other due process, but the law right now at the state level does not allow that. And I can only read into why that is the case. I think the presumption is that if you've got, where there's smoke, there's fire. So if you've got 5 civility complaints, then this officer has an issue with their interactions, even though they didn't rise to the level of sustained. I think that's probably the thought process. But I don't know that we can change that. I disagree with it. I think the more proactive officers tend to get more complaints because they're doing more police work. And, people are getting arrested that might not like being arrested, or they might not like the outcome of the decision made. Doesn't mean they're bad officers, just because they're doing more work and they might gather more complaints as a result of that work. And I think their record should be expunged when they're not sustained. But that's not the law right now.
Right, and that's one of the reasons that the PAB end-of-the-year report to the commissioners indicated that, this is something we'd like to see happen at the legislature. And we'll see where it goes. We'll continue to put that into the report, and maybe eventually the legislatures will do something about it.
Yeah, and I think we could start thinking about this. I mean, obviously, we're developing a process, right? So what I was thinking of is maybe there's one way to do it so that, and this could be recommended to the legislators, right? That if the same officer doesn't have another complaint within 6 months, then the other one drops off. So even if there is, so if there's a pattern every 6 months or within that window, and then officers also know to improve whatever they're doing. It gives you time to improve how you're handling stuff, right? The idea is to learn how to be a better police officer, right? So maybe, is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it some time frame where they automatically drop off if there's no additional complaints? Because they're, at the state level, the idea is they want to track trends. But if it's one every 3 years, that's not a trend. But obviously the officer too is going to be like, hey man, this thing drops off my record in 6 months as long as I don't have another one. So then they're incentivized to even be, the idea is to incentivize the officer to be better, not to punish them for maybe a frivolous complaint, right? So, if I'm thinking, I know for my driving record, right, when I get a ticket, I'm thinking, man, I can't get another one of these for 3 years, you know what I mean? So, I need this stuff to go away, So I think from the same perspective, it should be maybe we recommend that, Bill, 6 months, a year, whatever it is, whatever they're comfortable. It gives the state legislators an opportunity to track some patterns, but at the same time gives the officer, a fair, if this is not determined to be unsubstantiated. If it's substantiated, then it can stay on, whatever, but if it's not, then it could fall off.
There's also law that mandates that we have in our policies something called an early intervention system, which addresses this very fact. And what that is that it's a mechanism that triggers an intervention if somebody has a certain number of complaints over a certain period of time, so that we take a look at it and we say, okay, is there an issue here? Is there an underlying personal issue where the employee has to be referred or should be referred to an employee assistance program for stress or whatever the case is, or can we apply some of the wellness initiatives that we have in place? So that, separate from this, is already mandated and we're already required to do as police agencies, even when there are non-sustained complaints regarding an employee.
Well, appreciate that.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. A great discussion about the tracker, and I'll schedule a meeting just internal for the PAB to talk about how we're going to get it out there and on the web and other issues related to it. Okay, thank you. All right, so the next item on the agenda is updates from law enforcement. Should we start here on the right with the sheriff's office?
Good morning, Colonel Richard Hart with the Sheriff's Office. We have nothing to report.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, and welcome to the board.
Thank you.
Chief Spalding from the Sykesville Police Department, and fortunately, we have nothing to report either.
Great, great.
Good morning, Tom Ledwell, Westminster Police Chief. I wish I could continue the trend, but I provide you with our quarterly report, which breaks down 4 sections. We have our uses of force at the top, including the type of force we used, the type of incident that occurred in the next column, and whether we found it to be within policy or a violation of policy. So you have that. We have what we do, which is not required by law, but we do it anyway in the interest of quality control, and that's we call it arrest, detention, search, review. So whenever we have an investigative detention that doesn't result in arrest, when we do a non-warrant search, or when we charge somebody but don't process them through central booking, that could be they go down there, there's a medical issue, we have to take them to the hospital and release them. All of those are reviewed up through me as the chief of police. And so what you'll see in that section is all the incidents that fit that criteria, and what the type of incident was and what the outcome was. Finally, the next section, that's all of the either complaints or inquiries we got over the quarter, what the nature of it was, what the type of incident, and the outcome. So an inquiry is a question. It could have started as somebody calling up and saying, I want to make a complaint, but there was a discussion between somebody at least a supervisor level or above and the individual, and it was resolved. And there was an understanding that, okay, I understand now. It may be, hey, I was, doing this. Why did I get a ticket? There was an explanation. That's an inquiry. Then we have our complaints. We had one in there that was a non-ACC matter. It's something that we identified, didn't involve a nexus with a person in the public. It was handled internally, and the outcome is the one internal investigation that we had in the final section. So that's our quarterly report and from the Westminster Police.
Thank you, Chief. This, of course, is not all the actions that the Westminster Department takes over 3 months. It's a very good report. I appreciate it so much, but what decides, what happens that you decide to put it into this report? I mean, this is not everything, right?
Oh, absolutely not. Yep. So are you talking about the ADS review, or are you talking about the other sections? What are you talking about?
I'm just asking what type of incident happens where it gets into this report versus it doesn't get into the report?
So all of any complaint that we received and any internal investigation that we initiated during the quarter is going to go in here. We also include all of our uses of force. So you can see when we had an incident that's a reportable use of force. So that would be anything from an empty hand control technique through deadly force would be considered a reportable use of force. So we provide that. The arrest, detention, search review, like I said, they fall under those 3 types of categories. If we have a warrantless search, what we do is we take the incident report. It has to go into an incident report. We have an administrative form that gets attached to it, and it goes up through the chain of command to put eyes on it, to make sure we're doing things the correct way, up through me. And so this is a list of all of those that occurred during the last quarter. Of course, we do a lot of other police work, but it doesn't fit that criteria.
So are for example, like when you say warrantless search traffic stop, is that where there's a car stop and there's a canine search with it?
Absolutely. If you had a positive canine alert and the vehicle was searched, that's a warrantless search. The only kind of warrant search is when you have a search and seizure warrant that's signed by a judge. So any type of search that we do that there's no search and seizure warrant, that's a warrantless search.
I've got a question, this 24-26, where a performance issue, where there was some sort of a complaint, but you say it's a non-ACC matter?
Correct.
That's because one officer complained against another officer, is that the way?
So under Maryland law, you have what's called technical infractions. Those don't go through the ACC process. This is considered a technical infraction. If an officer shows up late for work, if an officer misses a court hearing, if an officer doesn't follow internal policy of some type, but there's no nexus to a member of the public, that's considered a technical infraction. So we still may do an internal investigation. We initiate what we call a complaint form, and if it merits an internal investigation, we'll do an internal investigation, and it could have outcome that includes discipline up through termination. But it's not an ACC matter because it's considered under Maryland law a technical infraction. It doesn't meet the criteria for what the law says we provide to the ACC for review.
Right, I think the ACC needs to get it if it's a complaint and it involves a member of the public. It doesn't necessarily have to be a member of the public complaining,
Correct.
but it has to be,
There's a nexus to the member of the
Yes.
public, correct. And that we forward all of anytime there's a nexus to a member of the public, it goes to the ACC.
great, thank you. Okay, moving to my left.
Good morning and welcome to the board, Mr. Chairman. My name is Adrian Baker, Tonytown Police. We have no ACC cases on the horizon. The police department did contract with the policy company Lexapol and have submitted a new policy to our city attorney, and we're waiting for that review, so there will be some new policy. Our staffing status, we have an authorized strength of 16, and we have 2 vacancies presently, and I'm very hopeful we'll have a couple candidates fill them in the very near future, and I have no other concerns for the board.
Thank you, Chief Baker.
Yes, sir.
Sir?
Good morning. Dave Snyder, Hampstead. We do have 2 matters, I believe, that we're going to bring before the ACC in the next cycle, the March meeting. Other than that, nothing else to add.
Thank you, Chief Snyder. Sir?
Good morning, sir. Yep, John Hess, Town of Manchester. I do have that 24 case that will be coming in a abbreviated version. That case has been adjudicated. Subject was found guilty, and we're finished with it.
Thank you. Anything else since we started from the officers? Anything from the board? Tom, any comments from you? No?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I see some members of the public back there. Anybody from the public care to make a comment?
No, this is our assistant county attorney and our intern.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. All right.
Still make a comment?
Great, okay. So let's move on down to the next agenda item, which is the drug dog sniffs. The ACC asked for this to be placed on the agenda, and the county attorney asked for this to be placed on the agenda. So we want to talk a little bit about it this morning. The ACC last week, or last month in February, heard 2 cases that involved complaints from dog sniffs. And I think there was a third last year, late in the year at some time. These dog sniffs seem to be garnering a lot of attention. And not only have they gained a lot of attention from the public and the complaints seem to be growing, but the court system has also been very active in adjudicating and making decisions on these dog sniff matters. It's been to the Maryland Supreme Court. Dog sniffs have been to the Maryland Supreme Court. Dog sniffs have been to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I provided a handout. I guess the U.S. Supreme Court is probably the most salient authority on dog sniffs. And I provided a handout of a summary of the 2015 decision by Justice Ginsburg in Rodriguez versus the United States. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I am going to say down at the bottom where the last sentence under the line is, I'll read that, extending a traffic stop to conduct a dog sniff is unconstitutional as an unreasonable seizure under the Fourth Amendment unless there's a reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. And so the ACC has been hearing these dog sniff cases, and it's been a very robust discussion within the ACC as to whether these dog sniffs, in most cases, are violations of the folks' Fourth Amendment right. It's a very nuanced kind of a decision that you have to make when you're trying to decide whether a dog sniff is lawful or not. And I think in all the cases that we have decided, and I serve on the ACC because I'm the board chairman here, on all the cases that the ACC have decided, the officers have either been exonerated, or the claim of the complaint was unfounded. But it was like I say, it was a robust discussion, and it kind of went either way as we talked about it. And so I just want to get this, we just want to get this out to here for everyone to talk about, because it has been such a, a growing issue here, and we have had a court system that has weighed in on this. Tom, have I forgot anything, or did I say too much?
No, I don't. I think some of the problem is that the public doesn't understand when a canine search can occur. In other words, it's always like, well, why my car? They've been pulled over for some violation. They haven't been pulled over to have a canine search done. They've been pulled over because their license was out of date, their tags were out of date, or some other violation. And concurrent with that, there was a canine search completed. And sometimes you can see a person's demeanor go from calm to really upset when this dog goes around their car. So I think some of it is that the public doesn't understand the law and what it allows police officers to do on the scene. And then it comes into this, the length of time involved. And we just had a case, literally I had to watch the video and do a timeline to see how this went. Now, in this case, there was no charge, but you really had to put a lot of time into that. So that's I think the context of the discussion. I think there's not a lot of understanding about when a canine search can be done during a traffic stop, and that people aren't just being pulled over to have a canine search done. There has to be a reason for that stop in the first place. I think that's some of it. Does it make any sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, and before you comment, I'll just say that according to the courts, the traffic stop cannot last any longer or be extended in time longer than what it would have taken to take care of the reason for the stop. And the second thing is that the officer needs to have reasonable suspicion, and it has to be articulated. He has to be able to say what it is. He just doesn't have a hunch. He's got to say, this is why. So we just wanted to throw it out there and ask you guys what you think about it, and ask if there's any way that we can improve the perception of the public, and also the understanding, do the officers understand what these parameters are? I don't know, based on what I've seen, that they do. In the cases that we heard, it was felt that the stop was extended, but it was a reasonable, if the extension is reasonable, we certainly, it's certainly okay. I think that's known as a Terry stop or a Terry decision. So just want to get your thoughts on it. Is there any way that we can improve the way we do these? That's all. Yes, sir.
So I taught search and seizure in the police academy for decades, so I'm very familiar with this topic and explaining it to our police recruits. I think you're spot on, but kind of mix a couple things. So the way the law works, and feel free to jump in if somebody wants to comment, is as long as a vehicle is stopped for a lawful reason, which is typically a traffic violation, there's no more personal intrusion of privacy to take a police canine around the exterior. They're not going in the car. They're going around the exterior. So the courts have said there's no more additional intrusion on somebody's personal liberties when police run a canine around the exterior of a car during a lawful traffic stop. You don't have to have reasonable articulable suspicion to do that. The law doesn't require that. As long as you had probable cause for the traffic violation, the initial reason the vehicle was stopped. Now, you can't extend that traffic stop in order to conduct the canine sniff, because that's considered a criminal investigation, which does require reasonable articulable suspicion to extend the length of time. Once you're done with the traffic stop, then you would need to have had separate reasonable articulable suspicion to extend the stop beyond the time it takes to write a ticket, to run driver's license, to do whatever the normal business of your traffic stop would be. So you got one circumstance where you have a car stopped, the only reason is your probable cause for the traffic violation. Police are allowed to, while that traffic violation is being handled, run a canine around the exterior of the car. If the dog alerts, then that traffic stop now transitions into a criminal investigation. You now have probable cause that a crime has occurred because there's a positive alert for an illegal drug in the car. That automatically allows the extension of the stop for a reasonable period of time to conduct that investigation. The dog does not alert when the car goes around the car, then the traffic stop ends as soon as the traffic violation has been handled. So it's kind of two separate things as far as you have the stop for the traffic violation, which you need probable cause for that violation, which only allows you to keep them stopped long enough to conduct whatever is reasonable and normal during the course of a traffic stop. If you have nothing beyond that, when you're done with that traffic stop business, you cannot keep that person detained. If you have separate reasonable articulable suspicion that there's a criminal violation, that allows you to extend that traffic stop for a reasonable period to conduct that criminal investigation. If a dog alerts during a traffic violation, that creates probable cause for a crime, which then allows you to extend the stop to investigate that, for a reasonable period, to investigate that crime. Where you'll see a lot of the case law with canine sniffs and traffic stops are when you're calling a canine from a distance away and the stops takes a half hour and for the canine to get there to run the dog around. And the courts will say, was that reasonable? Was the officer, trooper, or deputy, was it reasonable that they were conducting business of a traffic violation that took that long? But as far as the other stuff, it's pretty clear, and I think our officers understand that. I think sometimes there is confusion as to when something, from the public's point of view, is just a traffic stop, or there was an alert that then extended it into a criminal investigation. if that makes sense. The other issue where I've seen complaints come over a traffic sniff is people will feel that they were either targeted for an unlawful reason or, harassed because it's happened to them before. So that's the other issue that we as agency leaders have seen and deal with. So really, and I think this goes into what the gentleman over here was talking about with discretion is, when do you call for a canine? And a lot of times, the person in the vehicle might not even know the additional reasoning. We may have information that involves somebody in that vehicle separate from the traffic stop where it's a criminal investigation. We've gotten drug tip, we've watched them, we've seen things happen that we're not going to tell the people in the car to tip our hand. And we're going to have the police canine go around the car in the interest of furthering that investigation. But as long as we just keep them there for the length of time that it takes to handle the traffic stop, the courts have been clear that there's no further intrusion on somebody's Fourth Amendment rights just because the dog goes around the exterior. Don't know if I'm being clear or if you have any questions.
Anybody got any?
I was just gonna, obviously, the public's not gonna understand, right, this, I think what Tom's point is they don't understand the process of a dog search, so they feel immediately like they're being unfairly targeted, right? Because a normal traffic stop doesn't involve a dog. They don't know all the other parameters of it, so I guess, again, comes back to maybe some sort of education, or awareness sort of thing that we can get out, so my point is just maybe, having the officers use extra diligence as to whether or not to enlist the dog search, right? And to make sure they're documenting a little extra when they know this is coming up, because it's gonna probably end up on your lap somehow if it's, doesn't prove to be legitimate. And I guess from the ACC's perspective, we had a lot of these complaints where the dog sniff was unsubstantiated. So then we start, like, you do the sniff, it alerts, and there's nothing there, or no hard evidence found. There could have been obviously something in the car where the dog was alerted, but maybe it's now no longer in the car, maybe they didn't find it. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could have happened, but, so I think that's probably what I would suggest is, be cognizant of the length of time, and then, make sure your officers are doing extra, documentation. They got their radar up to say, oh, this is gonna be one where I need to be. Why did I think, the driver's acting unreasonable, something's going on, I detected, there's a whole lot of red lights that are going off when they're calling for these searches, so make sure they're all covered on your end. That's probably the only thing we could do. And then be aware of them starting to trend, because that's how we're gonna figure out.
We had just to take a recent case in general, where it was a stop for license tags. And there was some confusion about whether the tags were valid or not, because the driver was going from regular tags to historic tags. And so it was a little bit confusing. But the driver was very patient, not uncivil at all. And I assume that during the investigation, the officer was checking the background of this individual, as you would expect it. And concurrent with that car stop, there was a canine search done. And when the canine officer came on the scene, the guy's demeanor completely changed. He went from civil to hostile overnight. And he quoted this Fourth Amendment situation of, you can't make this stop too long, et cetera. So it's a, I don't know, it's complicated, but I think the officers understand exactly what they can do and can't do. And they have to be able to do their job. But I'm not sure that the public always understands, and they want to know, why me? I've been pulled over for a violation, and as far as I know, the officer has every right to do the free air scan. There's nothing in the law that prohibits that. But people get very upset when it's their car and it's happening to them. They're not being pulled over so they can do a canine scan. They're being pulled over and there's some other violation, some other underlying violation. I think it's part education, not necessarily so much for the officers, because I think the training they get and their in-service training keeps them up to speed on what's happening. But I think the public doesn't quite always understand how that process works.
Absolutely, and I think being clear to them too, saying, hey, I've identified this and this is why I'm doing this, documenting all that stuff even on the camera and telling them too, so that they're aware of what's going on right on the scene. I mean, you don't want to just be doing this stuff and then they're like, well, why me? Like you said, why me? Well, this is why you know what I mean? And this is how I'm documenting it, and this is what's going on, and this is how long we're going to have this wrapped up as expeditiously as possible. I mean, when you start to keep them involved in I mean, it's just going to help. I don't know if it'll eliminate all of it, but.
Chief Ledwell, thank you for that very thorough explanation.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Is it your position that an officer can do a dog sniff for any reason at all, as long as it occurs within the time of the normal period of the stop? Is that your position?
Correct,
And that the officers does not need reasonable suspicion to do a dog sniff?
correct. And so it doesn't mean that we should do it. So therein lies the rub, right? We're not required by law to provide a reason as long as it's during the traffic stop. Should we do it for every stop? Absolutely not. And should it be done for the right reasons? Absolutely. And that is the rub of, why me? And so there's different circumstances. I'll address what you said earlier. Number one, just because we don't find drugs during a search doesn't mean there are not drugs somewhere in there. There's places that drugs get secreted that we're just not going to search during a traffic stop. We'll just leave it there. The dog's ability to sniff is, I don't even know how many times greater than a human's. They're going to detect odor. People swallow drugs when they're getting stopped.
50 times more powerful.
And we may have reasons that they don't know that we watched, that the Drug Task Force has provided us with, or whatever the case may be, and we're not always able to tell them up front. Because, yeah, we'd want to be transparent. There's typically two situations that we're going to find ourselves in. One, I conduct a traffic stop for a traffic violation. That's all I have when I conduct it. And as I'm conducting that traffic stop investigation, things start to, red flags come up that make me suspicious that there's a potential crime in addition to what I've already stopped. There's that situation. And then there's a situation where we've already got an investigation going on and we see a traffic violation. It's been called at times a pretext stop. We have a lawful reason to stop the car now, and we've already planned to bring the canine into the investigation. So those are kind of the two circumstances where you'll see a canine called. And it is up to the officer's discretion when they call for a canine or don't. I think for the most part, our officers are very diligent in understanding when it's appropriate to call for one versus not. If I conduct 10 stops throughout my shift, when do I call for a dog versus when do I not call for a dog? And so there is some discretion that I don't think we're ever going to be able to solve with policy or legislation unless we're told not to do it. But I think for the most part, we are definitely, and that's something that you'll see, we scrutinize, you'll see on the list of things we're looking at. After the fact, if we do a search, a warrantless search, it has to go in a police report, and it gets reviewed up through me, and I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, okay, why did we call for the dog, and why did we do this search? So we are looking at these things, and we are scrutinizing them, and the officers know that.
And that discretion is primarily based off of reasonable suspicion, usually. Yeah,
Sure.
So,
It's not required, but yeah, usually there's a reason for the officer calling for a canine.
I guess we need to double check that because according to the Supreme Court, in order to do a dog sniff within the time frame, you have to have reasonable suspicion. You're saying that you don't.
Absolutely not.
That's
if
a difference to me.
if we look at the ruling in the case here, from what I'm seeing, they detained him until a second officer arrived on the scene. And the whole reason the Supreme Court is saying that it took too long is because, I'm thinking it's because they called a second officer to the scene. They just didn't walk the dog immediately when they had it. They made the guy wait until a second officer came so the officer with the dog could walk around. That's why they're saying it was a time-based issue. So it gels perfectly with what you're saying, that if you've already got the dog and you just decide to walk it around the exterior, you're not really prolonging the stop.
Correct.
But when you tell the person, I'm going to call a second officer so they can back me up while I walk the dog, that's what's prolonging the stop.
Yes, you're correct. If you extend the stop, there is no requirement for reasonable suspicion to run a dog around a car during a lawful traffic stop right now. If I extend that stop for any reason beyond my traffic stop, then I need reasonable articulable suspicion to keep somebody detained.
Okay.
It's
That
not.
could be obtained during the stop, right? So
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying, is when you want to document that, why did I have that reasonable suspicion?
Correct.
Next to then
And the
extend the stop.
the reasonable suspicion is not to call the canine. The reasonable suspicion is for an investigative detention.
Right, some other crime had going on, right?
Yes.
Okay. Don't get us wrong, don't get me wrong. I want you out there protecting and serving, and I want you getting those drugs off the streets and out of the hands of our kids. That's very important, and I appreciate the fact that you guys do such a good job at doing that. So, no worries about, from my standpoint, about the sniffs. Okay, any other one of the chiefs want to weigh in on the issue? No? Okay. All right, thank you. So we'll just move on to the next one. This next agenda item is sort of the throw-all for anything that might be of concern of anybody, an old business, anything that comes up that we haven't talked about, that somebody feels that we need to address, anything. Okay. Well, then, hearing nothing, I guess I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Second? Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you so much.